Hey, when did your something's not right here gut feeling ever save you? There's a very fun road that gets you from Niederndorf to Vach or back in Germany. You can go 50 or 60 clicks along smooth, tight turns and little rolling hills. All around it for acres and acres are fields of whatever's in season and no intersections for several kilometers. It's a very fun road to go too fast on. This day, something like wheat was in and it was high. I couldn't see around the corners, but I knew the road well and was staying in my lane. And I was going fast and smiling. About halfway in, I heard a voice in my head as clear as if the speaker were sitting next to me, and it said, "You need to slow down." It was startling and I braked immediately. 2 seconds later, I come through one of the turns and into the butt end of a combine, taking up both lanes and moving slowly. I barely stopped in time. Those extra 2 seconds of brake time saved a Volvo at least, but I'm pretty sure they saved my life too. If it was an old Volvo, it would have survived and you wouldn't have. If it was a newer Volvo, you would have survived and the Volvo wouldn't have. I used to just drive around country roads when I would feel stressed out or sad as a way to just get away and listen to music. One evening I was driving with my best friend in the car and we're on a gravel road that has a huge hill. We were driving towards the sunset, but it was winter and the light was fading fast. As the car started down the hill, I had this moment where I thought to myself my brights should be on, and I flicked them on, and at the bottom of this super steep hill stood 6 deer on the road. I slammed on the brakes and the car turned sideways and skidded to a stop like 4 feet from the deer. Those stupid deer didn't even move. They just stared into the passenger side of my car, and my best friend pointed at them and said, "Hey deer." The car was fine, we were fine, and Bambi was all good. I don't drive around like that anymore. They run away when you tell them to get a job. Every deer that doesn't move when I talk to them, no matter what, will every time run away when I say, "Get a job." They really don't want to work. Do you know that I give you money for uploading my videos to TikTok, and the one who gains the most views in a month gets an extra $1,000? More details on my Discord server, link in the comments. When I was in college, I lived in a sketchy part of Chicago, Humboldt Park, Logan Square, before gentrification. I liked to take late night strolls, even when I was living in that neighborhood as a 20-year-old woman. Yeah, I know, pretty dumb of me. One night, I was feeling stressed out, so I embarked on one of my late night strolls. I was walking along a somewhat busy road. Cars were zooming past me, pretty normal. I wasn't paying much attention because I was too wrapped up in whatever was stressing me out that night. Suddenly, a chill shot up my spine. Hypervigilance washed over me and I became more alert than I had ever been. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me. I quickly spotted a car. It was driving in the opposite direction, a little slower than usual. It was too dark for me to see anyone inside the car, and the car was pretty unassuming. But I still knew something was off. They were watching me. I just knew. The car drove past me and then made a U-turn. Now it was right behind me, creeping along the curb. Luckily, there was a Walgreens a few blocks ahead. I started walking faster and the car eventually sped past me and disappeared into a corner. I somehow knew I wasn't safe yet, so I still sprinted to Walgreens. I told the security guard what happened and we both went outside. The car was parked up the street about 100 feet away. The security guard was a big guy who looked intimidating. He marched toward the car and the car immediately backed up, made a U-turn, and then booked it out of there. The security guard called the cops and they drove me home. I never took a late night stroll again. My gut made me more alert, but it was really the security guard who saved my life. I'm positive that if he wasn't there that night, something bad would have happened to me. I wish I could find that security guard to thank him. I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest x-ray, blood test for blood clots, egg, and a few other tests, but all came back normal. After observing me overnight, everything still looked good. Oxygen saturation was perfect. My heart rate was still a bit elevated, but nothing too crazy, and it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The ER doctor asked me how I would feel if they sent me home, and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such and that I had no real basis for it except that I just felt off about it. He said, "Fair enough. Let's try one more test, and if that comes back negative, then we'll send you up to general medicine and see if they can track something down." That test was a VQ scan that found despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots, I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms and am on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling and the ER doctor who was willing to listen to it. EMT here. I was taught if a patient tells you they think something is wrong or they think they are going to you need to listen to them. Was sitting on one of those metal cylindrical electricity boxes outside my house when there was a blackout. Electricity was slightly flickering in my house. No other houses had a blackout. I looked down at what I was sitting on and I was like, maybe this is the source of the problem. I stood up and stepped away from it, and like 2 seconds later it freaking blew up. Like a pillar of flame shot out and above it for almost a full minute. It was basically a gigantic Bunsen burner, and I was a few seconds short of physically getting fried. My sister, since she was about 5, was always obsessed with tsunamis and would always ask my dad every night before she went to sleep if there would be a tsunami that night. We lived on a beach. About 5 years later, when our family was holidaying in Samoa, an earthquake struck at about 6 a.m. It was only a dull, low rumble, but went on for over a minute. Everyone at the resort woke up and went outside for a few minutes, then went back to bed. My sister, having been obsessed with tsunamis, ran down to look at the water and noticed the sea going out and saved a lot of lives, including my own. There was about a minute from her noticing till the tsunami hit. Luckily for us, there was a cliff right behind the resort. If not, a lot more people would have been killed. So something like a gut feeling 5 years in the making. Not me, but my science teacher. When she was a teenager, she was standing near some lights at a pedestrian crossing with her and her friend. Very chill, but out of nowhere, she had this gut feeling that both of them had to move. They moved just a couple meters away, and the next moment a car had hit another car, and it hit one of the street electricity utility poles, and it fell and exploded. Minor explosion enough distance away that it didn't hurt the girls, exactly where they were. One of the wires had also snapped and hit it exactly where they were standing as well. They basically were in a scene of car wreckage and snapped wires and electricity explosions and the pole collapse. Just real insane. If the pole had missed them, the wire would have hit them, and if not that, then most likely the cars. My mom and her entire family were saved from dying from carbon monoxide poisoning by her dad. He left for work, got a weird feeling, and drove back home. Everyone in the house was unconscious, and he had to drag or carry them all outside one by one. They all survived. I woke up from a deep sleep at like 2 a.m. during a winter storm. Something wasn't right. I immediately went looking for my senior dog and couldn't find her anywhere in the house. My roommates had a tendency to let her out for a walk and forget about her, closing the door. I ran to the front of the house and found her laying on a welcome mat. She was hardly breathing and covered in snow. She had been outside alone for at the very least 5 hours. I moved out shortly after. Last year, December 1st, I had slept for almost a week trying to fight what I thought was the flu. Woke up and that exact gut feeling kept on telling me something's not right with me. Called the parents to tell them and then cabbed myself to the emergency room. Took blood, the whole 9 yards, was there for 8 hours. Discharged and sent home. Called the next morning asking me to come back because they found something in my blood. Bacteremia and endocarditis. I was put on penicillin immediately for 2 months. More tests, more things wrong. Went for a specialized test on December 21st, woke up to them telling me I need surgery as soon as possible. They're trying to find a surgical team, earliest is the 24th. I go in, and while they're operating, I have an ascending aortic aneurysm, and it caused an aortic dissection. They're able to fix it. I've got a synthetic valve in there now. Here's the kicker. I work in a restaurant kitchen just before the start of the holiday season. Normally, most cooks would tough it out and just work. Most think it happens and it'll get better soon. Just keep going. There was just something about the way I was feeling this time that made me go to the hospital. I'm told that if I had done that, I more than likely would have died before my birthday, and they would have found out about the aneurysm during the autopsy. That still sends freaking chills down my spine. My best friend works as an emergency room nurse at the same hospital that I was operated on, and she was freaking out internally but kept it together on the outside for me. She explained just how serious this all was after I was in recovery. I promised to tell her whenever I get that same feeling again. When I was about 10 years old, I was going to the beach with my older sister, her friends, and her parents. They had a van that was open in the back. Think white creepy van, no seats. The other friends of my sister's friends took turns sitting on the father's lap when he asked if they wanted to steer the van. He then asked me and my gut said no. This man is creepy as frick. The look in his eyes sent shivers down my spine. Once we got to the beach, I forgot all about creepy guy and focused on fun. Fast forward several months later, my sister's friends asked if my sister wanted to sleep over. She refused, and my mom and I were baffled as to why she didn't want to go. We kept encouraging her to. Soon she broke down in tears and told us that one night their father had touched her. The van incident and feelings came flying back to me. I wish I had not forgotten my gut feeling and shared it with my mother and sister before anything happened to my sister. Sometimes I still feel guilty over it. That was over 30 years ago. I don't remember what happened to the guy. I just remember a state vehicle at my house a lot afterwards. No one ever talked about it again, and I never asked. I want you to know it's not your fault. I was learning violin when I was about 10 from an instructor at my local music shop. I got the weirdest feeling from him, even though he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I wanted to vomit every time I looked at him, especially his hands. After 4 lessons, I told my parents that I had a terrible feeling about him and I never wanted to go back. Luckily, they listened and didn't make me ever go to him again. A few years later, he was arrested for touching multiple of his students. I have no idea how I knew something was off. He never did or said anything, but I just felt it. I'm just glad your parents listened. Wife called me while I was at work just to say she was home from her night shift and planning to go to bed. She had worked night shift for years and never called me just to say she was home and going to bed before. She also sounded weirdly detached on the call. I asked her if she was okay. She said yes, just really sleepy. I got a weird feeling and told her I was going to leave work and come home. She told me I didn't need to. I said okay, and then I left work and rushed home anyway. Found a suicide note taped to the garage door. I got to her in time, rushed her to the ER, and got her the help she needed. A week of inpatient psych, followed by changes to medications and doctors. This was about 5 months ago, and she is so much better now. Dad, give your wife a hug from me. It frickin' to feel that way, so glad you were able to help her. If you haven't watched my other videos, then be sure to watch this one. I bet it will amaze you. Or you can watch all our videos in a row in this playlist. Write your stories in the comments, subscribe, turn on the bell, and go to our Discord. There we give you money for uploading our videos to TikTok. You uploaded, you gained views, you got money. Link in the comments.